Hey everybody, so today I'm here to share with you guys our birth story, how Lexi came into this world. I have a little bit of a backstory. Also, she's here with me today, so I know at some point I'm gonna have to stop and feed her and all that, so just bear with me. But the things that I think are important for you to know is that I did have a C-section scheduled on August 27th, and that was really close to my August 31st due date. It was also the only day my OBGYN was going to be available to be at my hospital to deliver. So it was really important to us to have him, and I was really hoping that we would, but that's kind of like the backstory and the plan with her. I also have a almost 5-year-old daughter, Sophie, and a 3.5-year-old daughter, Remy, and with both of them I also had scheduled C-sections as well. I made it to those no problem, no hiccups beforehand. So yeah, that's just kind of the stuff to know before. Also, at my 36-week appointment, my midwife told me that I was a centimeter dilated and 50% effaced. So there was that at 36 weeks. And Mark had made jokes my entire pregnancy that he thought that I was going to go into labor early, and he ended up being right, but I did not believe him at all at any point during it. So it kind of starts on August 22nd. That night I was woke up by contractions, and they were fairly consistent, about every 15 minutes if I remember correctly, and they were painful, but not so painful I couldn't talk through, and they lasted about a couple hours, and eventually I just went back to sleep. And when I woke up, they really weren't there anymore. So it was what it was. Also, when I woke up on August 23rd, I noticed that she was a lot lower. She wasn't right underneath my ribs. I felt like I could breathe a lot more. And I actually ended up filming a day in the life on August 23rd, which was the day before she was born. I'll actually link that for you guys because you can kind of see me progressively throughout the day start to complain about feeling different body changes and stuff. So, you know, if you're interested in seeing that, I will link it. It's a little bit long, but I think it's worth it, and I really enjoyed the video. I really liked how it turned out. I thought it was very interesting, and I'm super glad that I filmed. But at some point during that day, I think it was around dinner time, I started feeling a really weird pain. Like, even to this day, I don't even know how to describe it. It wasn't nerve pain, I don't really know, but it was super painful, and I felt like she was just really low and in an uncomfortable position. So for that reason, I tried to bend over the couch, sway on my knees back and forth, and that did help. And then we went and put our kids down to sleep and did our nightly kind of stuff with them. And after that, it kind of came back, but not full force. So that's when I decided to take a shower after I ended that day in the life. And while I was in the shower, I felt a huge gush, and I felt like it was probably my water, but I wasn't 100% sure because I've never gone through this before. I couldn't see anything when I was looking for the fluid, which was good, but at the same time I was also in the shower, and when I could feel something, it felt a little slimy, so that's also why I figured it was probably amniotic fluid and my water had broken, but being in the shower, I couldn't be 100% sure. So I got out of the shower, I sat down on the toilet, I made sure to pee, and then I bared down, and we definitely heard a gush of water. So we kind of looked at each other like deer in headlights. We were not expecting this. It was, you know, you're very caught off guard. So especially being super close to the C-section date, I just felt like, you know, we were going to make it there just like all the other times, but she had other plans. So for that reason, we kind of did a little bit of running around, not really doing much of anything, kind of like in shock, but eventually we got it together. We got ourselves ready to go. We called my mom over to watch the girls. They were already asleep, so we snuck in and said goodbye, but they didn't really notice. And then we got in the car to go. I had put on an adult diaper, which worked out really well. So if you're a plus size mom, I definitely recommend the Always Adult diaper brand, and it works great for if your water breaks and postpartum. But I was kind of nervous on the way up there, you know. I knew now that my OBGYN would not be an option to deliver, and also our hospital was about 45 minutes to an hour away depending on traffic, and there's a lot of different things that can happen when your water breaks. You know, there's some people who deliver really quickly, some people who don't. I didn't know where I was going to fall on that. Luckily, I only had a couple of contractions. They were painful, but nothing crazy, and I don't know, I just felt like things didn't really progress or anything. So when we pulled into the hospital, I was super thankful. Also, I wanted to say really quickly, we had toured this hospital beforehand in my 3rd trimester. They had told us that we could do skin to skin after birth. We could have basically everything done for baby in our room because they had the equipment to do it there, like first bath, assessments, everything basically. And that our meals would both be paid for, and just all this different stuff that really made us feel good about it being like our first experience with this hospital. So we get in there and they take us to triage up in the OB ward. They did check me to make sure that my bag had ruptured, and it did. And with that, they just decided to wait as much as possible. With me not being in active labor, like I did have a contraction every now and then, but they weren't progressing. They weren't picking up in intensity or time. With me having a C-section, they did want me to wait as long as possible. We were aiming for 3:30 to be the ideal time to deliver. If you don't know, with C-sections, they do like for you to be on an empty stomach, because on the very rare chance that you need general anesthesia, which is where they put you to sleep, it's a risk of vomiting, and they don't want you to aspirate. Obviously, they would like for you not to vomit during surgery. So for that reason, they like for you to have an empty stomach. With Sophie and Remy, I think I fasted for at least 12 hours with both of them. So they decided that we would fast for around 6 hours, I think it ended up being, since I had eaten dinner, and they figured that would be good enough. That would be like a healthy medium for everybody, not waiting too long, but also not rushing it. So because I wasn't in active labor and because I had eaten dinner, we decided to wait and try and aim for 3:30 to have baby. So during that time in triage, the anesthesiologist had came by. I have had adverse reactions with my anesthesia every single time I've delivered. I have extreme vomiting spells, no nausea, just vomiting. And they're very intense, they're really hard, especially right after surgery. It's just a reaction that I seem to have to anesthesia. But my OBGYN had talked to me beforehand about maybe doing some stuff differently. He told me to make sure that I mentioned it to the anesthesiologist and we would see what we could do. So when they came to talk to me in triage about anesthesia, I told them everything that I had to tell them, and she kind of blew me off. She was like, oh yeah, you know, that's normal. And I was like, no, because she hadn't let me finish. She had only let me tell part of it. And I just kept trying to advocate for myself. I kept trying to tell her exactly what it was, exactly what I was going through. And eventually she was like, oh yeah, we'll give you something. And I knew she was talking about Zofran. I knew she was talking about giving me something like anti-nausea. And that's not at all what I was talking about. I'm not nauseous beforehand. I just start vomiting and I don't stop for hours. And I tried and tried and tried to get her to understand that, but she kept blowing me off, and she actually ended up walking out of the room. And I turned to Mark and I told him that I knew it was just going to be the same old reaction. She was going to try anything different. I was just very disheartened by that, because you know, if we had tried something different and I still had my reaction, at least we tried. But to be blown off, especially after me doing my best to try and advocate for myself, was really frustrating. So there was that, but during this time they were also doing pre-op stuff. I had my compression socks on, I got my IV, there was other pre-op stuff that they did. While we were waiting, I could not sleep at all. She was still super active. I was really uncomfortable. I kept having random gushes of water. I just couldn't sleep at all through that. Mark tried to get a little bit of sleep, and I think he did. And then at 3 o'clock they came and got me, wheeled me down to the wing, and that's when everything got started. They took me in there, and with this hospital, they did do my spinal first, and then they did my catheter. But at my old hospital, they did catheter first and then spinal. So it really could go either way. If you're nervous about that, I would just ask your hospital what their kind of protocol is. But they did do my spinal first. So the anesthesiologist who had came to see me, it was still the same one, and she was what I would call aggressive. In my experience, I haven't had very good luck with anesthesiologists. I find that all of them have been kind of dismissive and even a little rude. Unfortunately, I know not every anesthesiologist is like that. I just think that I've had bad run-ins, but she was by far the worst. She kept yelling at me, and actually yelling at me that I was doing things wrong instead of just trying to guide me and tell me what she wanted from me. And she kept very aggressively inserting the needle. Like, there was really no need for as aggressive as she was being. Thankfully, I had an amazing nurse who was there with me, and in my experiences, my nurses make up for my anesthesiologist 1,000 times over, because they are super nice, whereas my anesthesiologists tend to not be. The spinal did take quite a few tries. She tried 7 different times, and eventually she did get it, but she was really aggressive. She was really rude the whole time. And by the 7th try, I was in tears because it is painful, even though they numb you, because they are sticking a needle in your back. And I was also just, you know, obviously emotional with everything going on. And they laid me back, and then they started doing other kind of things to get ready for surgery. But I noticed that something felt off because I could still feel things, not just movement, not just pressure, not normal stuff with a spinal tap, but it was like I had actual feeling left. So I made sure to tell the anesthesiologist. I said how I could feel tingling in my legs, I still had sensation, and she was like, no, that's normal, you know, you're gonna feel people pushing and pulling on you, basically pressure movements and stuff like that. And I was like, no, this isn't pressure. Like, I can feel temperature, I can feel fingernails, like I can feel pain, I can feel stuff, I can feel what's going on, because when they inserted my catheter, I could still feel that too. And again, she tried to tell me that it was normal, and I ended up cutting her off. I told her that I knew it wasn't normal and that I could feel stuff. So then that's when she grabbed a can of something, she sprayed it down my leg and asked me if I could feel that, and I said yes. And that's when she inverted the table, so my head was down, my feet were up in the air, and all of a sudden I miraculously couldn't feel a thing. And she checked me again with the can of whatever, and I could hear her spraying it, but I couldn't feel it that time. So I was right, I still had sensation, and I'm really glad I said something, because otherwise she would have probably let them operate while I could still feel things. So I was rather annoyed with her at that point, and then I started crying because I was just frustrated again, you know, my emotions. And she hovers over me for the first time, asking anything to do with me, about like whether I felt okay or anything, and she asked me why I was crying. And I just looked at her. Like, I didn't even have words at this point. I just looked at her and I was like, seriously? And she's like, are you just emotional? And I said, yeah, because I'm gonna have a baby. And so then she just left me alone. And then they brought Mark in. I got to meet the OB who did my surgery very briefly. She introduced herself, and Mark was beside me. I felt pretty good during surgery. I kind of felt in between how I did with Sophie and Remy. With Sophie, I was really nauseous. With Remy, I was super tired. Felt kind of in between there. Not like I was going to barf, but not like I was going to fall asleep. So just a little bit of both. And it was the strangest sensation ever having Lexi. Right when they were ready to deliver her, they told me that I would feel a big stretch, and it was accurate, but I'm still not sure to this day exactly what they did. I was used to an OBGYN coming up near my ribs, pressing down with their full body force onto my stomach to help baby move downward, and the other OBGYN pulling them out. And it felt nothing like that. I know what that feels like, and that was not it. Honestly, if you told me that she stuck her entire forearm inside of me to scoop Lexi out, I would believe you, because that's how it felt. It was so strange. It was so uncomfortable. I felt instantaneously nauseous from the feeling. And like I said, it wasn't the normal push that they give you. I don't really know what it was, but she told me I'd feel a big stretch, and that's exactly how it felt. So with that, she was born. She came out screaming and crying and kicking. It was a beautiful, beautiful sound. They did bring her around the curtain really quickly for us to look at, and then they took her over to the table. I had Mark go and kind of be with her while they were doing whatever with me, and it was during this time that they were taking a little long. Everything was fine. Everything is fine with her. It was nothing to do with her. Everything health-wise was fine, but I could tell they were taking a while. Like with my other two, I knew that they basically cleaned them up, checked on them a little bit, and then came over and put them skin to skin with me. And the reason why it took a while is because when they came over, she was all wrapped up and swaddled, and I was really confused. And we kept trying to, like, for me to see her while I was, you know, obviously still having surgery done, and she's all swaddled up. It's a very awkward situation when they're like that. You know, it was a lot more natural and a lot more, I don't know, it was a lot easier when they're skin to skin and, you know, kind of meeting them for the first time that way. But regardless, I was like, you know, can you ask them if we could do skin to skin, because this is just too weird. So Mark asked them, and they said no, that they couldn't. and that they didn't have the staff available for that. So I was like, okay, well, if I can't because I'm having surgery, why don't you see if you can do skin to skin? Because that's what we've done. If I haven't been doing skin to skin with baby right after birth, Mark has done it. And they told him no because it was too cold. And I was really confused because skin to skin is supposed to regulate body temperature, and that OR was no colder than any OR I had been in, and I was just very confused by everything, especially because we had been told we would be able to do skin to skin. So they finished up my surgery. It went well, no complications. We finally got to do skin to skin. I got to nurse her, and she nursed basically for the whole first hour of her life. She did both breasts. It was really great, and everything went super well. Mark got to hold her for the first time after the people came down and did her assessment and everything right before we moved into our own private room. But post-op was very quiet and chill, exactly the way I like it, and I was actually feeling pretty good. So we got back to my room, and that's when it started to hit. We were starting to get adjusted, and all of a sudden I told him that I felt really hot. That's just kind of our cue word. We know as soon as I start feeling hot, I'm going to start vomiting. And sure enough, within 30 seconds of saying that, I needed a barf pan, and that's when the vomiting started. At no point during the surgery did she do anything different for me. She wasn't even near me at certain times during the surgery. She was talking to other people. There had been somebody who came in during the surgery and was talking about somebody retiring and cake and all this other stuff, and she was actually like on the far side of the operating room, nowhere near me, talking to this person. And I was just frustrated thinking about all of that while I'm, vomiting, and I have my newborn. And this is always super hard for me too, because as a C-section mom, it's hard enough for me that I can't get out of bed and like change her diaper and stuff. I feel really guilty about it. And on top of that, I also feel guilty for the reaction that I have because it is so intensive. Mark's normally right there by my side, holding a pillow against my abdomen, helping me get through it. And it's like both of us have to worry about this instead of just being with our baby. And it really starts to get me upset. And this time around, it was a lot worse. It was because I was dry heaving so much. I just felt like there was no time in between dry heavings. Like I wasn't even finished the first time before I started the second. And it just felt like I was gasping for air in between. And it was really starting to freak me out. And eventually it did start to calm down, and that's exactly how it goes. I'll have like a fit for like 15-20 minutes. It'll rest for 15-20 minutes, and then I'll start up again. And it'll last for about 3-4 hours. And that's exactly what happened. So during that 3-4 hours, we were just trying to do what we could while we could. And thankfully, she was like a perfect little angel during the entire time. She didn't cry once. She just kind of chilled. She was wanting to nurse, so I waited until I felt good enough, because that's another thing, is like with the vomiting and stuff, it comes on so quickly that I really don't like to hold her because I don't know when I'm going to start vomiting. And I don't want all that going on with her right there in my arms, because you just never know what could happen. So for that reason, I just get very like anxious about holding her. If I do, I make sure that Mark's like right there by my side. And it just sucks that I have to feel like that, but it's just apparently the name of the game when it comes to me and my reaction to anesthesia. So finally I started to feel better, and with that we could just focus on her, getting to know her. Like I said, we did a lot of skin to skin. Mark did some skin to skin. It was just really great to like finally see all of her features and everything that you think about while they're in there. And I don't know, it was just really great to have that alone time with her finally, where I'm feeling well and we can focus on meeting our baby that we waited so long for. So sometime during that, they did come in and they wanted to take her for her assessment, and we were really confused as to why they would want to do that, because they said everything could be done in room. And that's when we started quickly learning that everything we had been told on the tour that had been for both C-section and vaginal births was really just for vaginal births, which was really disheartening. We really wouldn't have expected any of it if we hadn't been told to expect it. You know what I'm saying? So it was frustrating, and as a C-section mom, it just made me feel really disheartened. At our old hospital, we were able to do skin to skin right away. They were very baby friendly there, but our old hospital no longer does any kind of OB, maternity, delivery, anything. So, you know, our old hospital wasn't an option. We had to find a new one, and it just felt like, wow, this really sucks compared to what we're used to. They did take her for assessment and she passed everything, you know, her blood sugars, because I did have gestational diabetes, those all came back perfect. Also her, you know, newborn screening, all the different labs they do, also the hearing test, all that stuff came back perfect, which was awesome. And then they did bring her back and we just spent more time nursing, skin to skin, just cuddling and taking her in and just kind of being in awe that she was actually here. And I don't know, she honestly did not cry really that much in the hospital. The only time she cried was when she was in her bassinet and she didn't really want to be there. So when you picked her up and you held her, she was quiet as could be. And during that day, her big sisters came up to meet her, and that was really amazing. And we didn't really tell them what was going on because we had no idea when things would happen, how they would happen, stuff like that. So it was just kind of a surprise to everybody, and they were so sweet, so excited to meet her, and it was just the most precious thing in the world. I don't know how else to describe it. So they came up and visited while my mom and my stepdad also visited as well, and then they went home, and we just kind of spent that whole first day just kind of taking her in and just, I don't know. The hospital is a very special time for Mark and I. I know a lot of people don't like being there, but we actually do, and it's just like that time to be just the three of us. When the more children you have, the harder that kind of time is to come by. It was just a really good time in the hospital, even though things weren't how we expected, and I had a little bit of a difficult recovery, which I'll cover more in my postpartum update. We really did enjoy the time in the hospital together before you come home to the hectic and the crazy that is having multiple children. Because of me and how I was recovering, we did end up staying 4 days in the hospital, 3 nights, and we went home on that 4th day later in the afternoon, like after dinner time. So we were there for like 4 whole days, and then we did get to take her home, and she was an angel the whole way home. And that's kind of where our postpartum journey starts. And like I said, I'll address more in my like recovery and how I felt and stuff in my postpartum update. That'll be coming very soon, but that's kind of its own thing. That's kind of its own story. But the important thing about this birth story is that she's here, she got here safely, and everything ended up working out. And you know, we were just so happy and feeling super fortunate to finally have our rainbow baby here with us. And I don't know, she's just everything that we could have hoped for and more. So I wanted to share this with you guys. It was very unique in the way that it happened. I was not expecting for things to go the way that they did. You know, Lexi was conceived on her own terms, and I feel like she came into this world exactly the same way. So yeah, if you guys have any questions, leave them down in the comments below. I'll do my best to answer them. Make sure to give this video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it. But I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and as always, thanks for watching.